I'm Joel MAKOWER, Chairman and Executive Editor of GreenBiz Group, one of the co-conveners of this. We're very proud and happy to be here and to work with my dear friend, Amy. This is Mark MYKLEBY, Colonel Mark Puck MYKLEBY, retired Marine Colonel. We'll get a little bit more into that. I first met this guy about a little over 3 years ago, on stage actually, at one of our events that we produce at GreenBiz. I had talked with him briefly on the phone, but we spent 30 minutes sitting in chairs like these that don't exist, talking about this incredible work that he had done. And he unfolded this story about the work that he had been called to do at the highest levels of the Pentagon in 2009, from Admiral Mullen, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, along with a Navy captain called Wayne Porter. And it was just one of those ideas that comes along that you just say, this is amazing, this is the right idea at the right time, not just for the world, but more important for me. And I just really found this extremely compelling. And as I got to know Puck and his co-founder at the Strategic Innovation Lab at Case Western Reserve University, realized a number of things. One was that how different we were and how different paths we had taken on this journey. Just consider the two of us. He's from rural Minnesota, pretty conservative place. I'm from the liberal San Francisco Bay Area. He enrolled in the Naval Academy, and then in the Marines, and I went to Berkeley. I was an anti-war protester, conscientious objector in the Vietnam-era draft. He served 28 years in the military, fighter pilot, doing missions over Bosnia and Iraq and other places. I write about sustainability, and so he's left-handed. I have hair. It's all very, very different.
I'll trade you.
I'm good, thanks. So we just so you know, we refer to ourselves as the jarhead and the pothead. So that's how we came to this field. But where we came from and where we arrived was just really amazing, because we realized that we had arrived at the same place, and that's that sustainability must be the organizing logic for a new American economy. This is the book that resulted from this. We're going to tell you a little story about it. It's a really complex story, so we're going to be, and Amy only gave us 90 minutes up here, and so we're gonna power through a lot of this. But Puck, why don't you take it from here?
Well, sure. Next slide.
There we go.
There you go. And for me, late arrival to the sustainability field, but it's one of those things, you know, it just sticks in your skin for some reason, you know? I mean, it just sticks. And what got me to this place of sustainability was the fact that, you know, I was happy as a Marine Colonel. I'm sitting down at Special Ops Command, doing strategy for special operations, and then I for whatever reason, get called up to work for Admiral Mullen. And when Mullen sat me and Wayne Porter down in front of him, I didn't know what the hell we were supposed to be doing there, but he sat us down and he said, "Boys, I just want you to go and figure out a new grand strategy for the nation." You know, I was like, well, holy shit, how hard could that be? You know, I mean, we can knock this out in no time. But it was an interesting perspective from the most senior officer in the military, U.S. military. By the way, I just got to say this side note about Admiral Mullen. If you're ever wondering, I mean, this is the only time I ever was up, I guess, into the show, you know, so working directly for Admiral Mullen. And I don't know what the rest of Washington is like, but I can talk about this character. The guy woke up every morning just to do the right thing. I mean, just oozed integrity. And I'll tear up if I talk about him more, but I mean, that's the nature of the man. So it was just a privilege to work for him, so I had to get that out of my system. That felt real good. But, so the task, do this grand strategy thing. And on Admiral Mullen's perspective on the world kind of harkens back to where this republic got started. You know, in 1776, Peter talked about Voltairean common sense. I mean, this might have been a theme, you know, during that time, because this guy named Thomas Paine wrote a little pamphlet called Common Sense, 1776. And on the very first page of that pamphlet, he says, "The cause of America is in a great measure the cause of all mankind." The cause of America is in a great measure the cause of all mankind. Pretty profound words. Now, you know, Tom back then was talking about self-determination, just that kind of basic idea you ought to have a say in your life, and the kind of government you should have, that you ought to be able to participate in that government. That was kind of new radical shit, right, in the world. Well, here, sitting in front of Admiral Mullen, July 2009, here's a man struggling with that very same issue. What is our cause today? Because as military guys, we've been out, spent a whole career headbutting people, but particularly after 9/11, we were out there fighting. And it doesn't matter whether it was Bush administration or Obama administration. Admiral Mullen was the chairman for both of them. He wasn't getting any kind of strategic guidance on why we were out there doing it. What was the cause? What was the purpose? Other than to preserve the frickin' status quo. We're better than that. Admiral Mullen knew we were better than that as a nation, as a people, as a republic. And as he looked at it, any trend line you see economically, fiscally, socially, politically, we were not trending in a positive direction. So he asked Wayne and I to figure this thing out. Well, guess what? We didn't do what he told us to do. He told us to write a strategy, and we said, you know what, American citizenry they don't need another frickin' strategy coming out of Washington, D.C. We got plenty of them. Trust me, go look them up. There's 200 and some strategies. I don't think anybody's ever read them. They're not strategies anyways. They're platitude. I call it, they're big-ass paradigms wrapped up in a big-ass platitude. I mean, there's just nothing to them, all right? And what Wayne and I decided to do was write a story, and we produced a document called the National Strategic Narrative. You know, I got there in July. We wrote it by August. I thought I was going to get the leave. Well, 2 years later, I was still peddling this stuff. But the bottom line, what we said in this document was we've got to get away from this frickin' manic focus on threat and risk that informs all our activities in this nation today. We are so amped up about every little threat and risk. Well, I'm here to tell you there's not enough bubble wrap in all of America to wrap around everybody's head to keep them safe. All right? The world's a frickin' dangerous place. And we're making it more dangerous because we're focused on the bullshit. We're not focused on the real challenges. And what Wayne and I said is we got to get away from this mindset of containment that requires force and power to take on the rest of the world. We need to move to something else that subscribes to what is going on in the 21st century, that actually operates along the lines of an open system. And we didn't know this was such a crazy world, but or a word that we were going to use, but we were saying, you know, in America, really, we were just interested in our prosperity and security. Those are our big enduring interests. And because we're on this old system, we're actually expending our prosperity in pursuit of security that's mostly defined on our 20th century past instead of our 21st century reality. We said there's got to be a better way. And we used this word and it was like dropping the F-bomb in church when we said it, but we said sustainability needs to become our national strategic imperative, our organizing logic for this nation in the 21st century. You know, so that our smart power, or our smart growth at home can become our smart power abroad, that we actually lead by example and take on these big, vexing challenges of food, water, energy, built environment, social equity. God, I said unmarine words, didn't I? Get over it, all right? Yeah, that's what we said. And Admiral Mullen, I love it because he loved it. He said, this is great stuff. Unfortunately, we can't do anything with it, right? Because he's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. This is the role of our civilian leadership. We don't want the military getting out in front, particularly on things like domestic policy. So we languished for a little while until April 2011 when we finally got to release this document. Can you go to the next slide, please? And in this document, we were trying to catalyze a new conversation around grand strategy in the halls of the civilian government. You know, where we would start pursuing our interests of prosperity and security, because sustainability, if you take that scientific definition of it, an organism's ability to remain diverse and productive over time. We could inform a new grand strategy, because diversity means depth, it means redundancy, it means resilience. That's the stuff we're supposed to be here for, right? It's our ability as a nation to take a gun punch and come back swinging. And today, we will not look at resilience as our national security imperative. We're so wrapped up about defense. I'm here to tell you it's not about our shores outward. It's about all our functioning systems, how we act as a society and a government today. That's what we were looking at. But also prosperity. We have to come to grips that we can't keep measuring prosperity in quantitative terms. We got to start thinking about prosperity in terms of growth in qualitative terms. When we could take a big lesson from a little country called Bhutan, you know, a little bit of gross national happiness goes a long way, right? Because I'm here to tell you that quantitative measurements, they're not frickin' working for us right now. And so this interesting thing about sustainability, not only does it map to our enduring interests as a nation, grand strategic interests of prosperity and security, it also maps to a quintessentially unique American way of doing grand strategy, where we stand on our economy. This sort of thing ought to be called the opportunity thing, because there's this common theme of opportunity. We stand on our economy, we line our governing institutions and our foreign policy to take on the great big global challenge of our age. Well, those are pretty interesting little wonky words. But the bottom line is, if we can figure out our economy, figure out the new market forces, we can figure out a whole new different direction for this nation, and in the process figure out a new direction for the rest of the world, because we've got enough economic ass behind us to make it happen. With 4% of the population, but 25% of the global economy. But the problem is we got to stop worrying about frickin' ISIS. We got to stop worrying about what Putin's going to do next, or what the frickin' Chinese are mucking around with the Spratly Islands and all that crap. I mean, those are the little speed bumps you find in life. You walk, I mean, walking down the street, you're going to skin your frickin' knee. So what? All right? Deal with it. Put a Band-Aid on it. The big global challenge of our age is global unsustainability. Next slide, please. And it's the big, wicked challenge of our time. And yeah, we tend to focus on climate change, but climate change is just part of the damn thing. The big problem is that we've got this wicked Gordian knot of a wicked problem, and it has 4 big components. Number 1, economic inclusion. Right? Now everyone gets a sweaty lip over the 9 billion people that have to come into the world by the middle of the century. Well, I get a sweaty lip at night thinking about the 3 billion global middle class we got to bring into the system by that time frame. Because bringing them into the system means that when they arrive, their resource consumption rate goes up 300%. And right now, ecological depletion, we're already using 1.5 planets worth of resources to support the human species. When that global middle class arrives, it's going to take 4.5 planets. Now, I have enough fingers and toes to figure that one out. That math doesn't frickin' work, right? And oh, by the way, if you're waiting for the old economy to come back before it was like in 2008, we're going to get there. You know, thank God there's a Fed. Well, bullshit. It's not coming back, because we are not in a great recession. We are in a contained depression. What happened in 2008 is as big of a deleveraging moment as what happened in 1929. That economy is not coming back. You know, right now, we're just keeping on life support with enormous fiscal and monetary policy, right? But the last thing is, even if we could bring it back, there's a resilience deficit in that system. We don't have the wherewithal to take the shocks, particularly the ones that Mother Nature is going to start chucking our way, to be able to take the wrinkles, okay? So good. Thanks, Al Gore. Thanks, MYKLEBY, for the frickin', cheer me up. This is the problem set. The good news is, because we're frickin' Americans, we have an opportunities way out. And that's really what we want to talk to you about.
Right. So I still don't want to follow this guy, but I keep having to do that. So Grand Strategy has a formula. In the book we lay out how this has happened in the run-up to World War II, and I think Puck will talk a little bit about that, how the private sector at the leadership at the federal level stepped up, but how we did this after World War II. We had these 15 million GIs coming back, and women who had been working in the factories. We needed to disperse the population to protect ourselves from the Soviet missiles, and a number of other things. And how we did all that has been consistent time after time. And so how do we seize that opportunity, looking at these 4 strategic antagonists, as we call it, the economic inclusion and ecological depletion, all of that, and how do we address this opportunity? And so this is the formula that we've been used, which is that you look at the demand, what are the sources of demand, find the capital to do it, back out the stranded assets, and you have your new economic opportunity. So what are the 3 big bins of demand? Well, there's 2 of them right there. I might as well get the 3rd one up. Oh my God, look at this. Can we move this back? This is either a trigger. There we go. I'm just going to... Yes.
Don't worry. It used to happen to me on an F-18 all the time. Push the wrong button. Stuff would fly off of it. But I think everything worked out okay. So.
You don't say next slide, please? No. So the first one, we talked from the mayor a little bit at the beginning of the day about this walkable communities. We're having this convergence take place between now and 2030, between the boomers and the millennials converging in cities, wanting to live there. And the reason is because, well, lots of reasons. The millennials want to be in the cities where all the action is. They grew up in the suburbs and don't really intend to go back there. Boomers don't want to age in the suburbs. They're afraid that kids are going to take away the car keys and leave them stranded out there, and talk about stranded assets. And they want to be in the city where things are happening. There's access to services. But more than that, just if you look at what Americans want, 60% of Americans, according to the National Association of Realtors, want the attributes of smart growth. They want to live in walkable, transit-oriented, opportunity-rich, just experience-rich, opportunity-dense communities, and whether they're in cities or in suburbs. And so there's opportunity here now, because we're not putting our real estate investments into that. There's a massive opportunity to densify cities and create the conditions for walkability, as well as in the suburbs. And this is across the country. It's not a coastal thing. It's not a big city thing. We have the opportunity to retrofit the suburbs for the new urban kind of environments around transit villages and town centers and all the other attributes that we're seeing now become successful. But this is not how our policies are structured. Most of our policies, from federal loans all the way down to county and city ordinances, are structured against this kind of thing. It's against, they're in favor of single family cars, around building parking spaces and garages. And so there's a lot that needs to happen on the policy side, as well as deploying the capital and bringing in the developers to take this on the development side. Regenerative agriculture has come up several times today. See, Paul mentioned it, Nancy Fund mentioned it, I think a couple of other mentions of it. Between now and the middle of the century, we're going to have to increase our food production between 60 and 70%, and 100% of that needs to be regenerative, which basically means agriculture that sequesters carbon, heals the soil, and cleans the water, which is kind of the opposite of how agriculture is done now. And it's again, it's a massive opportunity, just like the housing opportunity, which, by the way, I did not say, is that housing opportunity that's available now for walkable communities is three times the demand for housing that occurred after World War II. It's truly a demand of historic proportions, and so is the agricultural opportunity in terms of how we create these conditions for restorative ag. And there's a lot going on in this space, and because agriculture that's done restoratively, it's going to be 3 times the profit per acre. It's going to provide all the ecological benefits that we've been talking about. But it's also going to keep food local and resilient in many cases. Right now, again, policies are, some of them going back to the Nixon administration and good old Earl Butz. They incentivize fence post to fence post, large scale monocrops, and we don't need to be farming that way anymore. Again, it's a state like Indiana, one of the most agriculturally rich states. From a soil and conditions perspective, 95% of the food they eat there is imported into the state. Amy was talking about that, not too different, I think, for Idaho. So we have this opportunity that also contributes to local and regional resilience. By the way, each of these is multi-billion dollars, a $250 billion for walkable communities annually, about $190 billion annually for regenerative agriculture. But the big kahuna is resource productivity. Bernard was talking about the fourth industrial revolution, and this is the kind of thing that's key to that, which is basically the fact that we need to be creating more stuff with a lot less stuff. How do we provide what we need? And this is where a lot of what's already been going on in the corporate world, some of what Interface was doing, as Paul was showing, it's the circular economy, the clean tech and clean energy economy. It's the sharing economy, the bio-based economy, the zero waste economy. We already have all of these technologies. We have the ability to do all of these things. The question now is just to step it up. 225 billion, 190 billion, 850 billion for resource productivity, and these are annual numbers. So we got 1.3 trillion when you add this up in terms of what's the opportunity for America and America's economy. So maybe the other part of the equation is demand. I'm hitting this once. It's like a bargain basement here. Here we go. Stop. Talked about, well, the other parts of the equation are around capital and stranded assets. And this is where what I love about this grand strategy is that this is not about federal funding. This is about how the private sector steps up. So there's plenty of money out here. We've been hearing about it all day. There's a lot of money. There's about $3.5 trillion of corporate cash sitting on the sidelines. There's about $2.5 trillion of the cash portion of institutional investors. There's $10 trillion in hedge fund and private equity cash. There's $24 trillion of our retirement accounts sitting out there. And it's not all it needs to be deployed on all of this, but there's a lot of money. And it's all, a lot of this is looking for a new investment hypothesis. Because as we all know all too well, the investment hypothesis for so many of the investments that we've had in the past just aren't paying all that much. They're not all that healthy, and we don't even know where it's going in many cases. So if you want to, learn more about how that's developing. Talk to Puck later about Long Haul Capital, the institution that Puck and Patrick are setting up. But the point is that when I mentioned those sources of capital, I did not mention federal funding. I did not mention state or local funding. I mean, that may come and that may be there, and there may be some of that, and the public-private partnership opportunities are significant. But this is about private capital doing public good. The stranded assets part, we talk about a number of them. Labor is certainly one of them. But the one I want to talk about, and again, very quickly, because we just want to get on with the rest of this, is the unburnable carbon part, which is we know that the amount of carbon that is in the ground, that it's on the books of oil companies and coal companies that we cannot burn without basically game over from a climate perspective. And at the same time, most people don't know that about 20% of the oil, petroleum that's pulled out of the ground doesn't go to burning. It goes to building. It goes to hydrocarbons, it goes to advanced materials, it goes to a lot of the kinds of things actually you've heard some about today. It goes to things that actually sub out for steel and timber and aluminum and concrete, all of which have significant carbon footprints and water footprints and can provide a lot of those benefits. And so the question is, how can we build with hydrocarbons instead of burn it? We can still take it out of the ground, at least some of it, but instead of 20%, maybe 80%, maybe 100% someday of the hydrocarbons that we mine can be used to build things. And so there's ways out of these things. There's some big visions of what's possible, and none of this stuff it can turn on a dime. But the point is, and as much as we heard from Paul and Project Drawdown, we know how to do this stuff. We know how to do this stuff, and from the perspective of grand strategy, we've done this before.
And this is the key point. You say, when we talk about grand strategy, you say, yeah, that's nice. Go to a war college, talk to it, DC, yuckity, yuckity, yuck. Right? Bottom line is, all we have to do is pull our strategic heads out of our asses and do what we do best. We have done this before. I mean, World War II wasn't just, there was no magic elf on a moonbeam that just came down and figured that stuff out. You had to think strategically, right? Now everyone thinks that World War II for the United States started with Pearl Harbor. Well, I'm here to tell you, it started in May 1940 when FDR saw this war coming that nobody would recognize, let alone nobody wanted, who wanted a war, but it was getting forced upon us, right? And nobody in Washington, D.C. was willing to take the lead, whether it was civilian government, whether it was the military, didn't matter. So he turned to the private sector. Specifically, he turned to the guy on the left, Bill Knudsen, who was the president of General Motors at the time. And he turned to him and said, listen, you got to go figure out how we're going to get us on this nation on a wartime footing. And guess what? He did. He figured it out. Along with another guy, Bernard Baruch, he was a Wall Street type guy. They figured it out. They figured out the demand, the capital, and the stranded assets to create the economic engine to create this arsenal of democracy. Next slide. This arsenal of democracy. I mean, that thing was something that FDR leveraged it on his little fireside chat, but it was Big Bill Knudsen was the one that coined the thing. All right? And what they did is they took demand for the war materials and they figured out the capital and the Lend-Lease program. But the cool part about it is they leveraged the private sector. It wasn't going to be an act of charity in the private sector. They figured out the cost-plus contract. So people could make a buck. And oh, by the way, we could deploy all that underutilized industrial capacity and all that labor that was sitting there, and we'd get ourselves ready for war. And it worked out so well, this arsenal of democracy thing, that by the time of Pearl Harbor, on 7th of December 1941, the United States was already producing almost as much stuff as Nazi Germany. By 1943, we were outproducing Great Britain, the Soviet Union, and Nazi Germany combined. And by the end of the war, 70% of the stuff that the Allies used to win the war came out of an American factory. That happened in about 4.5 years. That's a pretty impressive track record. And guess what? We can do that same type of framework again. But I think we just have to come to realize that we're out of World War II. We had the greatest generation. And don't get me wrong, I love them. Card-carrying member of their fan club. All right? Love the greatest generation. Next slide. But we got to come to grips with the fact that our greatest generation can't be in our freaking past. All right? This is being thrust upon us, this generation, to become the next greatest generation. Because guess what? Our best isn't in our past. We got a shitload more best to find, discover, deliver to the rest of the world because they're waiting around for us to do it. All right? If you don't think they are, guess what? You need to take a victory lap around the world just once. because they're waiting for a little bit of American leadership, and we're the ones that have to deliver those goods. The question is, and I love what Colin said earlier, can you get over your politics? Can we get over our small-minded politics and get back to our big-minded ideals? Can we think big, and can we do big? The individual question that all of us have to ask is, can we shit-can our ideologies that hold us back and allow us to have a great, elaborate excuse matrix why we can't get anything freaking done? And can we start talking to other people? Can we start figuring out what is the best on the left and the right and converge those things to start creating the future that our kids and our grandkids freaking deserve? That's the fundamental question. Now, I put it in my terms. Who am I willing to play kissy face with to get some shit done? Well, look at us. I mean, it's some pretty ugly pillow talk at the end of the night, but we're getting it done. It's over to you.
There's so many things I love about this guy, but there's so many things I love about this project and this book. I was not looking for anything to do when Puck and Patrick came into my life, and I realized that there was a story that needed to be told, and that was part of the story that I had been working on for almost 30 years that I wanted to tell within that. And there's two things right now I want to tell you that I loved about this. First of all, to Puck's earlier point, this is about the best of the left and the right. It's got a progressive agenda around energy security, food security, water security, as well as national security. It's around food, around local and regional resilience, job creation, economic development. But this is by business, for profit, without Washington. Or Washington can lead, follow, or get out of the way. This is not about waiting on Washington. The other thing I like about this, and this is something I've been talking about for well over a decade, is that we have not had many leaders. Paul may be one of the few, business, cultural, political, who can tell a compelling story of what happens if we get things right. Right? Think about it. We know what happens if we get things wrong. Thank you, Al Gore, Bill McKibben, Rachel Carr. I mean, thank you. They're sounding the alarm, but we haven't had anyone showing us a positive vision of what's possible. These guys had that vision. We together now, I think, share that vision of what's possible and what this looks like and how we might get from here to there. There are a lot of times that we as Americans want our leaders to step up and think big and do big. That's something we all crave. How do we get the leadership that we want, that we need in this country to do the stuff that needs to get done? This is not really one of those times. This is about us. This is about what each of us needs to do, can do, should do in our businesses, in our communities, in our economies, wherever we play, around having that kind of opportunity and around creating these conditions, around delivering on this promise, this huge, huge economic promise, and then this bigger promise of where we want to go as a country. And so what was really fascinating is that if, these slides never work when I want it to. Can you move it to there we go. If this proud Marine can come together with, I don't know, Superfly over here, to share this vision, there's something going on here that's beyond politics, that's beyond ideologies, it's beyond cultures, it's beyond generations. This is really an extraordinary opportunity that we have in front of us. Buck?
Next slide. I'll close this out, because what Joel said was critical. Is, this document is a pretty cool thing, I mean, I even swore an oath to it, nobody ever told me that my responsibility, I was ever absolved of my oath to this piece of paper. It was a pretty special piece of gear, right? People say maybe they were a little bit utopian when they put it together. God damn, yeah, they were. I'm glad they were, right? I'm utopian. I got called that in the Pentagon. It used to piss me off, I finally looked up the word. Anybody ever looked up the word utopia? And there's two ways you can spell. I mean, it's got Greek origin. There's two ways you can spell utopia. There's topos is place. You can spell the U part of it though two ways. You can spell it O-U way. You can spell it an E-U way. Well, O-U way means no place. EU place or EU means good place. Which one do you freaking want? I know the one I'm voting for, and I think I know the one that these cats voted for too. And that's what I also just point out, this promise of America is also that's articulated in this document is also our obligation to America as citizens. And so the very first thing up there, the first words are, we the people of the United States. We the people of the United States. It doesn't say frickin' waiting on Washington. It says we the people of the United States. In order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, and most importantly, secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Posterity. Anybody know? I've had to look up that word too. It means our kids and our freaking grandkids. When are we going to take that obligation seriously? As citizens of a republic, a government of the people, by the people, for the people. And as Hubert Humphrey reminds us, those 6 words, form, establish, ensure, provide, promote, secure, those are action words. They're freaking verbs. They don't allow us to sit on our ass and wait for somebody else to do it. All right? So if anybody always asks, so what are you asking? How can I help? I don't know. Go fucking figure it out. I don't know. Figure it out. I'm doing long haul capital. We can talk about that later. You go figure it out on your own. But let's frickin' do this thing together. Because these words on this document, they mean something. This is the quick start guide for our frickin' country. The rest of the Constitution's our operating manual. They mean something today, here and now. They mean something for our kids and our grandkids, because guess what? They are stuck with the decisions that we make today. They are stuck with what we do or what we don't do today. But when we go back to the reason where we started all this caper around grand strategy, what is the cause of America? Well, I can think of no other cause that's more in keeping with the finest and best traditions of this nation. I can think of no other cause other than sustainability that is more worthy of our kids and our grandkids in the future that they deserve. And I do believe that if we as a United States, as a country that people look upon to lead, if we take this cause of sustainability on today, here in the 21st century, we will, in a complete measure, be taking on the cause of all mankind. Thank you.